Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to MineWarp. This is, of course, the podcast where we talk about everything new in mining, everything innovative, and that's why we talk to innovators and to investors and also the implementers at mines who adopt new technology, and not only technology, but new things. And so today we're also talking to an advisor to the mining world, and which is why my guest today is Corné Yzelle. Corne is Global Lead for Strategy and Transformation at AMC Consultants. And she says she helps mines to unlock their hidden value by combining smart data with real-world execution. That sounds really smart, Corne, and knowing you for a few years now, it makes sense. But it's fantastic to have you on MineWarp. Welcome back.
Thank you, Empie, for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of our guests that don't know you, maybe let's start with a little bit of an introduction. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Maybe start with your background and so on, and then your career up to now in a nutshell.
Thank you, Empie. For those that don't know me, I am a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a business transformation professional. I really enjoy spending time outdoors and really keeping things simple. The world of business is complex enough. So just to give you a bit of a background of my career journey so far, I'm a metallurgical engineer by formal training. I studied at Stellenbosch. And as I like to say, mining I didn't pick mining, mining picked me. My first job after I finished my degree was working for a Center of Excellence sponsored by Anglo American Platinum out in Stellenbosch with university. And that is how my career in data analytics and digital transformation really got started. So kudos to Professor Chris Aldrich, who helped me get started with my journey. Following my time there, I went to Johannesburg. I worked for a company called General Electric, who were really busy driving
small little company
that were busy. I would say accelerating the digital revolution from an industry perspective. So I was joined at a very exciting time when things like predictive analytics in equipment maintenance and operational performance management were really key topics that were starting to get introduced to the industry, although it existed for a while, was really starting to hit implementation. And so there, my role was solution architect or solution designer, if you will. And I really enjoyed working with clients to understand their problems and figuring out what solutions we can offer to solve that. During my time there, one of my last assignments was to develop a digital strategy for a local mining company. And that really was very interesting. And of course, I subsequently got the opportunity to go and deliver the strategy that I built them, which was much, much harder than I had thought. So
a promise you make is a promise you keep, right?
Exactly. I couldn't resist. I had to go see what it's like to go deliver the things that I had conjured up, sitting in front of a computer and see how it works in real life. And that's really where my passion got started. Although it was extremely tough, probably the toughest 2 years of my career, it was really meaningful and really exciting at the same time. And so I wanted to do more of that. And I thought, why not do that back from the world of consulting, where I get to work with multiple clients and learn from them and see best practice. And so I joined Deloitte in the operations transformation division. And was privileged to be involved with initiatives like actually rolling out a predictive maintenance program on a mining site for a client and various others. So really enjoyed that journey and learning a lot. Really got to appreciate the importance of change management and organizational transformation. I don't particularly like doing that kind of work, but it is very important. And so I've got at least an appreciation for it. And then I would say, one of the things that I learned during my time there, in addition to the importance of change management and working with people, is how important fundamentals are when it comes to driving value. So having a proper mine plan, as an example, those are important fundamentals that drive big value. someone recently said, if you implement technology, you're just amplifying what's in place. If you've got poor plans in place, technology will amplify that. If you've got good plans in place, it will, can transform your business. So that became important for me as a next part of my journey. And so I joined AMC Consultants, which is more known for the depth of technical expertise. And of course, I've got a couple of unique pieces of IP that really interested me. You spoke about the smart data. So that refers to our benchmarking data set, which is best in the world.
And we'll talk a little bit about that in more detail.
And we'll get to that in a little bit more detail. So that's my journey, and that's how I got to be where I am today, and really enjoying sharpening my more technical skills.
My dad was a very practical man, and he had 4 boys, and he would always say to us, when one of us would say, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? He'd always say, all right, you've got the vision, you've got the job.
Yes.
That sounds like the story of your career.
Exactly. But, curiosity.
So, exactly. Yeah, let's start a little bit at the top. You've kind of had this front row seat to watching mines evolve technologically and, as you said, also culturally and so on. What are some of the bigger shifts that you're seeing now in how mining businesses approach transformation today, as opposed to maybe 4 or 5 years ago?
I would say what's different today than several years ago is the acceptance of technology as an important value driver, but also often I would say it's now more closely embedded and integrated into the business improvement environment. So it's people understand that it's an enabler rather than a silver bullet that's going to solve your problem. So I think that's much better established and embedded in how organizations choose to do digital transformation. So that's one of the key changes. And along with that, though, closely balanced with it is understanding how to set up your data architecture to support scaling what you're trying to achieve. So there's a lot more companies that have focus teams looking at the operational technology architecture and defining guidelines and standards and getting that stuff in place, because ultimately if you do a lot of digital things, eventually when you do them point by point, you'll run into scalability issues and integration challenges. And as one of my former colleagues used to say, it becomes spaghetti bolognese in the back end.
Yeah. That scalability issue is a massive one. I think of just the evolving of the concept of master data and master data management. And if you do that poorly, so if you don't plan your data architecture, as you say, then you really have big noise, not big data, right?
Exactly.
And it's pretty useless.
Very well said. Another quote I like to use is, it may be true, but it is useless.
Yeah, exactly. I want to ask you maybe a little bit more about that. Well, since we're talking about it, and you also talked about AI, if you look at big language models and so on, as opposed to the previous iteration of smart tools was business intelligence, and you had to have these rigorous master data, in order to give you dimensions against which to report and so on and so on. Nowadays, you don't impose those patterns, but you ask AI to discover those patterns, I should say. Do you see a lot of movement in the implementation of AI to discover problems today on mines, or is it still in its infancy?
I would say I've seen that. Well, we've at least internally have used that in our benchmarking data set. We've played with AI. Not played, we are leveraging AI to actually help us ask questions for our database. It used to be, Excel based and easily to explore. Now it's in a database, and now we need to ask it questions. So I would say in less complex data environments where data is more structured and it's probably being used more often and people are experimenting in that environment. I have not myself seen that being very actively used in the mining space to understand complex data, although I would say a lot of vendors are talking about it. And they have very interesting things to say. I just haven't seen anything meaningful yet.
Right. And okay, let's talk a little bit more then about, smart data. From what I understand, it is maybe not enough to do it any justice. So just give us a bird's eye view what this smart data concept is.
Excellent. So it really is something that we started more than 20 years ago in the company as we were looking at different mining sites and trying to help benchmark performance and costs down to a driver level for mining operations against others, for the reason of being able to understand where if this particular mine we're looking at is looking very differently to another mine and how they are performing, that gives us a signal that there's an opportunity for improvement. You still have to go and obviously investigate and do a couple of things, but it gives you the clue. Additionally, it helps us understand what's the right set of assumptions we need to use when we're doing a mine plan or a mine design. So it really is a well curated set of operational data of a real operating mine operating in stable conditions, not ramping up, ramping down, that kind of thing, over a 12-month period. So it's stable data, processed and worked into our cost and productivity driver tree, so that you can actually compare apples to apples. You can compare the way that we treat the data means that we can reliably compare, the cost of development for mine A against mine B, while mine B is contract mine and the other one is owner operated, etc. So it really is, it's validated by site visits and working with the client. So we've got sort of the trusted quality behind that information, and it's extremely useful. When I look at the assumptions people use today for feasibility studies and for mine designs, this really, there are heuristics that are used, and in many cases, those are reliable. But when we compare heuristics with that people use today and their experience to what we see in mining operations of a similar kind, there's often a big difference, which could be a massive difference in ultimately the plan that you are putting forward and the business case you're putting forward. So our smart data really is a key, it's like a mirror you hold up against your own operation to see where opportunities sit.
I've seen so many mine planners and mine plans that have been developed based on averages at a certain operation, or maybe, I was at this operation of my company, now I'm moving to that operation. And we always said this is the average, advance that we can make when we're doing development. Or we always said this is the average, consumables that get used per square meter or whatever the formulas are. And so using something like this, especially when you are at the long-term planning phase, can really make a big difference in the accuracy, because if you make a small mistake, it can escalate very quickly. And then maybe that comes back to what you said earlier, technology just makes your error worse, faster.
Exactly.
Instead of helping.
And you still have to stress test that, right? It gives you the clue and gives you the signs of, maybe a problem or an opportunity. Go and have a look, go investigate. And sometimes you can go and confirm that it is valid. But you also have to look at the system constraints and how does this performance indicator influence the system as a whole? Does this benefit really pull through all the way, or is there something else to consider? So it is important. It's a very, very cool piece of toolkit to have in your back pocket. It's really good, but it needs to be used in combination with other toolkits and, of course logic and reason.
And so on. So how do customers make use of that, and how do they contribute towards this data set? Is that something that they sign up for, or how does that work?
Yes. So at the moment, the way we do this is we come to site to do performance diagnostic. It's a combination of the data processing and then we make charts available. We can process your data, map it into the right structure, and make sure that the insights we bring are correct. You get other platforms where you can submit your productivity and cost data, but the way that data gets treated can often lead to the wrong treatment and the wrong results, because there's, even though there's finance standards, there's different ways of interpreting how certain costs get allocated. So we would need to handle your data, or in the future help you handle your data, and put it into our platform, and we would provide you with a report. Of course, we anonymize, and all information is confidential, so it's not at risk. But one of the things we've done recently in the last 2 years is we've upgraded from Excel into a proper managed database, because we have the intent to make this available as subscription offerings. So our platform is basically ready for people to subscribe to the data at a certain fee, and then we would get involved to make sure. For us, the quality of the information is super important, if that hasn't come across clearly yet. But we would want to be involved with the process to make sure that the treatment of the data is correct, and that the interpretation of the results and the insights are reasonable and meaningful for you in the organization. So we would like to be involved.
You do realize you've just alienated half of the engineers in the whole world by saying Excel is not a real database.
Of course it is.
You used the term value drivers just earlier, and we've talked about value driver trees and value flow. Kind of as a horizontal look at the business and a vertical look at specific parts of the business. Let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean when you use the term value drivers, and maybe value flow as well?
Yes, so I think value drivers really talk to the key influencer of value. If you take from the profit you make to the tons and the costs, and you break tons down into the value flow. That's where the value flow comes in. And once you understand the value flow, you have further drivers, because within each activity within your value chain, you've got further value drivers. And so it's really about understanding how they stitch together, and how value drivers at the bottom show up in the value stream or value process at the top. And then and based on that system, how much of that translates to value at the top. So it's a multifaceted problem, and it's things like improving shift hour utilization, and how does for a loader in an underground environment, how does that translate into the tons that you can move within your loading operation, but how much of that translates into tons that either sit on a stockpile or actually makes its way up the shaft to the plant. So you have to understand how does that value then translate into the rest of the system, and then only would you understand the true value.
Right. So I mean, it's understanding the upstream and downstream relationships between the various processes in the business. Now, that of course means that you have to have a good model of the mine, expressed in this case maybe as a value tree and as a value stream. Is this something that you guys maintain for different kinds of mines, or how do you use that practically when you approach? Well, maybe let's start with that. When a mine approaches you, what are some of the questions they ask you, and then how do you employ these various tools?
So when we work with a mine, they typically have a particular problem they're trying to solve. For example, they've really been struggling with achieving, certain grades, and they would like us to come and have a look. Or they say, listen, we have been on a downturn for some time. We just can't figure out where to start. There are so many things wrong. Help us understand where do we get started, and how do we prioritize, and then how do we get going. And like I've explained before, typically we go in with just our performance diagnostic approach, inch deep, mile wide. We understand the whole of the business, how the systems fit together, processes, data, performance. We try and get a bird's eye view, and then we can say, okay, this is what we believe you should do. You have to fix your mine plan. There's something wrong there. Your short-term planning is not prioritized. We need you to focus there. And oftentimes the fix is not technology, but oftentimes there are technological solutions that can enable and assist. And so
Right.
that's our usual process. And then once we have an understanding of the environment, and again, I think the benefit of what I like about our team is it's more of an expert-led approach. So yes, we've
Right.
got the data to help us demystify and identify key issues, but there's
Mm-hmm.
always more work to be done. So that's when you can go into more deeper root cause analysis with tools like value driver models, where you can really test your assumption. We are doing some very interesting work with a local partner with discrete event simulation and testing,
Mm-hmm.
the impact of certain choices, technology choices on your
Okay.
fleet size and your where do you place certain thing, your workshops, etc.
Mm-hmm.
underground as we're doing mine planning. So that's when you can start using that kind of models, and of course you can use your simpler models, your probabilistic models. So there's a variety of tools we can then use depending on what the situation is to really understand where the bottlenecks lie in a part of the process, and how can you improve efficiencies. And like I've mentioned, sometimes the problem is you need better road haulage designs.
Yeah.
It's an engineering solution, and sometimes it's a people solution that is needed, and sometimes it's a technology that can support.
Yeah,
And
or a data solution and so on, right? Well,
often
that brings me to the question. Maybe sorry, you were going to say something first.
I wanted to touch on that because often
Mm-hmm.
it's the word we call situational awareness. Oftentimes it's just an absence of information, or a lack of understanding on who's making a decision based on the information. That's a big cause for why improvement isn't taking place.
Yeah. So 10 years back, everyone talked about big data, right? Fast forward a few years, that turned into digital transformation. Fast forward a little bit more, and it was digital twins, and so on and so on. And so these these container words, or these big picture words, often come up, and they have their moment in the sun on the stage, and then they disappear. What are some of the typical problems that you now hear that mining companies are asking you to help them discover? I'm thinking of things like automation and electrification strategies and so on. Um, are those what you're looking at, or what's really hot today?
So I will differentiate between international and local. I would say
Okay.
locally or Africa-wide, we are seeing in the last 2-3 years, actually, um, you know, a lot more interest in remote operating centers. That is
Okay.
becoming a common theme, and there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of IROCs that have been implemented or planned, maybe didn't get implemented in the end, or they were implemented but they aren't quite performing yet. So I would say Africa is lagging a bit behind between the rest of, and there are exceptions. We're busy doing some, a bit of a research exercise around the maturity of some of these and what we can learn. So that's
Okay.
one of the things we're seeing, especially I would say open pit mining environments have been if the leaders perhaps in that kind of
Okay. Yeah.
in doing that. But underground mines are also busy following and trying to do that. And we see a lot of productivity in the mines overseas that have some of this capability. They get really good value. But of course, their context is different. For them, it's often driven by extreme remoteness of location, or labor costs and availability. Whereas in South Africa, the context is different. And the second topic is automation. So quite a number of work going into remote operations, semi-autonomous and autonomous operations from a drilling, loading, and hauling perspective. So that is certainly something that we in South Africa are perhaps lagging behind a bit when it comes to the implementation of these technologies. And so it's becoming a more prominent feature in roadmaps across the world.
And then that the whole term transformation, I mean, it should imply leaving you with a different business than what you had a few years before. So do you see that? Do you see that mines are able to transform from a company that approaches their business in one way to a different kind of company, does that transformation really take place?
With the right leadership in place, yes. There are some good examples of mines that have been able to make some shifts, perhaps not all the way, and perhaps still with a little bit of help from their consultants and vendor friends. But certainly in the mines that have been most successful, it's because there was strong leadership that was really bought in and driving and actively involved with changing the culture. Even in particular, there was one particular mine that had, while I was working with them, had a change in leadership, and it was chalk and cheese from the earlier management to the new management in terms of their attitude towards driving it. So leadership makes it's probably the biggest differentiator between the success of these programs. And you talked about transformational shifts. I think one of the bigger implementing remote loader is not a big shift in my opinion. Big shifts, bigger and more difficult shift has to do with achieving integrated planning and integrated operations and short interval control. Those are very difficult and complex because it involves multiple departments, multiple new tools. And those are really hard to get right. And there are a few people, luckily, that have succeeded in driving that change, but it takes much longer than you would think on paper.
So how would you differentiate between and even a very aspirational or ambitious continuous improvement goal and a transformational goal? What's the difference between continuous improvement and transformation towards a specific goal?
Continuous improvement means taking the same process and just making it more efficient. So it's saying this is our planning process. It runs in a particular way, but hang on, I can improve the speed at which I get information from you to me, and that makes our planning process more efficient. I can now do a plan in this way much faster. Transformation requires a bit more of a mindset shift. It is saying, okay, we're going to have some, and oftentimes there's a bit of role changes involved. It says, okay, we are not going to do planning the same way we've done planning before. We are not going to have a static plan. We are going to have a rolling plan. That is a fundamental mindset shift. And in some companies, in one of the companies I've worked in, it actually meant some of the long-term planners, for them, it was a difficult thing to adopt because it's not what they were used to. And they decided to leave because they weren't ready or willing to make the change and adopt that process. So there is, and sometimes it's subtle, but in short, business improvement or continuous improvement is taking the same process and just making it more efficient. Transformation means process change.
Okay, so let's talk about, I like that you talked about the people who, some decided this is not for them, or maybe they were told you're not for this. I don't know. But what's some of the biggest cultural changes you've seen mines make and that have had the biggest impact in turning the mine around?
I would say some of the bigger successes has been in mines that embrace the transparency. Because the moment that you introduce data and systems and reports that make things visual, it's immediately there's a few people that get nervous because I'm suddenly exposed. I cannot hide behind a PowerPoint slide where I can manipulate the numbers. I suddenly have to expose. And that's why I said leadership is so important, because if you've got the wrong leadership in place, that is real risk for an individual. But where a safe environment is created for individuals to embrace the transparency, that's where you see the biggest shifts. And so it's a lot like what I've said before, but that's really where I see a big shift. And then from that point onwards, constructive conversations and how do we actually make this better. One of the clients I served, I remember some of our SteerCo meetings. I came from a different environment previously, and before the SteerCo meetings, I called him and I said, I need to speak to you because there's something I have to bring up in the SteerCo that's going to make you uncomfortable or you may not like. And he said to me, you can wash my dirty laundry in front of my peers. I have no,
Wow.
we don't have that problem here. It's okay. And I said, okay, well, it's welcoming that we can have robust discussion and honest conversation at a leadership level. So a safe space is needed.
That's incredible. And that's really leadership, right? Because it does not only set the rules, but it embraces it and applies it across. We're fast running out of time, unfortunately. But before we go, I want to ask you. Next month is mining in Durban, and you're standing on a balcony somewhere having a cocktail with a mine manager or a CEO, talking about these concepts. So what would be that one piece of advice you'd give to a mining leader starting on their transformational journey?
I would starting on a transformational journey. I would probably start off by, trying to understand what it is they're trying to achieve. Do they have a clear vision? Is that clear amongst their leaders? Really trying to understand what they're trying to achieve. I think it's not clear in many people's heads, and it's often where we run into issues. So that's I guess the starting point of the conversation. I would say invest in the right talent. You need the right leader to drive your program that can balance both the technical workload with influencing people. I would say you asked about successes, and the mines we have seen the best buy-in and support for these kind of programs has been where there was a senior leader in a position that was exceptional with stakeholder management and engaging a lot with people. So you need someone that's got the right handle on the technical and can do it with confidence and credibility, but also has the personality and going to engage with people. So I would say find the right individual and find the right partner. You need partners. You cannot do this on your own. And depending at the speed at which you want to go, if you want to go fast, work with people like us who can help you very quickly get to the bottom of understanding where your core problems are. So get to the bottom of it very quickly, and then start getting into action. I think there's companies that can take a long time deciding what they want to do when they've missed an opportunity to get on with what I call the no regret moves. So find the no regret moves, get some momentum, get some points on the board, and the rest will fall into place. So get momentum, direction will come.
You're talking about points on the board. I'm just this week I read an autobiography of Rassie Erasmus, the coach of the Springbok rugby team, and I was so pleasantly surprised, and it just maybe shows my lack of knowledge of the subject matter, but anyways, of the amount of advisors and the coaching team and the depth there. It is not a one-man team to transform or a one-man effort to transform even a rugby team or maybe a country's approach to building talent. It takes time, and then you have to bring the people along. Some have the technical skills and some has the personality. And you want to change the team, you'd better pick the right captain and so on. And it is fascinating to me to see that can be applied exactly like that in companies as well. So I like I like what you said about the right leaders as well. Corné? Yeah.
There's an article that I like to tell people about and share, which was where things clicked for me. It's Harvard Business Review has an article called "The Makings of a Corporate Athlete," and it it brings that analogy to when you look at athletes and athlete teams and the amount of support that they have, and they're only performing a small percentage of the time. Really, the rest of the time they're training. Us as corporate athletes and as I would say digital champions or transformation champions or teams, we perform all the time, but yet we don't put all the support or often get all the support behind us to make it happen. So very valid analogy and always top of mind for me when I think about the corporate athlete.
Yeah, no, that's good. Corné, we are in fact out of time. Well, this has gone so quickly. I've really enjoyed the conversation with you. Thanks
Thank you.
for being back on the MineWarp podcast. Your second time. The previous one was a few years ago. And thank you also for the work that you and AMC are doing in the industry. It's good work and necessary work. I mean, being a leader is a lonely job, and having good advisors around you, I guess, is critical.
Thank you, Empie. Much appreciated, and thank you for the podcasts and the useful conversations that we get to share in. And look forward to seeing you hopefully at the Mining in Durban next week.